I'd like to yield 2 minutes to my colleague, the gentleman from Alaska, Mr. Young.
Gentleman from Alaska is recognized for 2 minutes.
Unanimous consent provided and extend.
Without objection.
I'm interested in Title IV in this legislation, which is a good piece of legislation. The provision in Title IV of 3590 has the support of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the President of the United States. This provision is the Polar Bear Conservation and Fairness Act. It's a bipartisan measure that would make a very limited fix to an issue that affects a number of hunters nationwide. Prior to the threatened listing of the worldwide polar bear population on May 15, 2008, there were a number of hunters that took hunting trips to Canada under Canadian law and United States law. These hunters followed all the rules at the time and were prevented from bringing in their polar bear trophy due to the threatened listing triggering an importation ban under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. The legislation, my legislation, 3590, will allow the Secretary of Interior to issue permits to only those qualified hunters with legally taken polar bear trophies prior to the May listing dates. This legislation will allow up to 41 hunters to import their trophies from Canada. As a result, roughly 41,000 would be available to the United States, Russia, Polar Bear Conservation Fund to support conservation activities for the share of polar bear population. This provision that would bring in reserve for conservation activities that otherwise would not be funded. As a result, I urge the members to support this legislation. Keep in fact, these are dead polar bears in storage, hunted legally under the premise of Canadian law and the United States law. This is a good part of this bill, and by the way, speaking of this bill, it is a good bill. From the state of Alaska has more parks and more refuges than any other state. The Refuge Department doesn't allow to hunt on refuges in many areas. Park Service definitely don't allow us to hunt. And I'm arguing that this park and refuge areas are set aside for the refuge managers themselves and not for the people of America, let alone the people of Alaska. This legislation is the right way to go. Let's think about public lands, not the king's lands, not the administration lands, but the lands of the people. This bill is a good bill. I urge the passage of this legislation.